This is what we're going to do.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Give me a number between 1 and 37.
Oh. 8.
Mm-hmm. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Ooh, one of my favorites. Okay, give me a number between 1 and 5.
4.
Okay. Good. Give me a number between 1 and 4.
3.
Okay. All right. Well, we are doing Henry IV Part 1, Act 4, Scene 3.
I love this.
And I actually do too. That's a really fun.
I kind of like that way of picking it. That's really funny.
It really relies on the fact that I know what's happening in this scene.
Or we're both going to be surprised.
We're both going to be surprised. So actually this so this is one of my favorite plays, and this scene does not have Hal in it, which means I don't know about this scene. But it has one of the best characters in the entire play. In this scene. So let's pull it up and let's read it through. And this is really, really fun. Okay. So it's basically like, it's basically like war battle preparing. So in Henry IV Part 1, you've got Prince Hal and King Henry IV, and they're trying to keep out a rebellion. So Hotspur is actually, it has a couple of the best characters in the play in this. Hotspur is this like feisty, I'm gonna fight, I deserve the crown because of reasons. And he collects all of these absolute characters. One of them thinks he's a wizard. One of them, the Douglas is in this, is like this Scottish Braveheart type. And then he like collects all of these people, and then all of a sudden, like one by one, they just like can't show up to the battle. So Hotspur is like left all on his own.
Oh.
Yeah. So this is so as let's pull it up. Let's do it this way. Yeah. So as Hotspur argues with his fellow commanders about when to fight, they are visited by Sir Walter Blunt, who brings them a request from the king that they state their grievances and a promise that if the grievances are just, they will be answered and the rebels pardoned. After listing their grievances, Hotspur promises to send Worcester the next morning to continue discussions with the king. So this is a what's it? The Festivus airing of the grievances.
Oh, yes.
That's what this scene is. This is them just bitching before battle. So, and the fun part about this group is that none of them get along with each other.
Okay.
So we've got this group of rebellious leaders, but none of them can like get their act together enough to get anything done, which is just, it's great. We'll fight with him tonight. It may not be. You give him the advantage, not a whit. Why say you? Looks he not for supply? So do we. He is certain, his is certain, ours is doubtful. Good cousin, be advised, stir not tonight. Do not, my lord. You do not counsel well. You speak it out of fear and cold heart. I can't do a Scottish accent. Do me no slander, Douglas, by my life, and I dare well maintain it with my life. If well-respected honor bid me on, I hold as little counsel with weak fear as you, my lord, or any Scot that this day lives. Let it be seen tomorrow in battle, which of us fears. Yea, or tonight. Let's scoop down this. We're not going to read the whole thing. I thought it was a shorter scene than it is. Okay. So Blunt comes in. And I come with gracious offers from the king. Let's do this section. If you vouchsafe me hearing and respect. Welcome. Some of us love you well, and even though some envy your great deservings and good name, because you are not of our quality, but stand against us like an enemy. Blunt is like, oh my God, relax. He bids you name your griefs, and with all speed you shall have your desires with interest, and pardon absolute for yourself, and these herein misled by your suggestion. All right, so here is our airing of the grievances. The king is kind, and well we know the king knows at what time to promise, when to pay. My father and my uncle and myself did give him that same royalty he wears. And when he was not 26 strong, sick in the world's regard, wretched and low, a poor, unminded outlaw sneaking home, my father gave him welcome to the shore. And when he heard him swear and vow to God, he came but to be Duke of Lancaster, to sue his livery and beg his peace with tears of innocency and terms of zeal. My father, in kind heart and pity, moved, swore him assistance, and performed it too. Now when the lords and barons of the realm perceived Northumberland did lean to him, the more and less came with cap and knee, met him in boroughs, cities, villages, attended him on bridges, stood in lanes, laid gifts before him, proffered him their oaths, gave him their heirs as pages, followed him even at the heels in golden multitudes. He, presently, as greatness knows itself, steps me a little higher than his vow made to my father while his blood was poor upon the naked shore at Ravensburg. And now, forsooth, takes on him to reform some certain edicts and some strait decrees that lie too heavy on the commonwealth, cries out upon abuses, seems to weep over his country's wrong, and by this face, the seeming brow of justice, did he win the hearts of all that he did angle for. Proceeded further, cut me off the heads of all the favorites of that the absent king and deputation left behind him there when he was personal in the Irish War. Blunt's like, oh my God, this is not part of the story. Please stop. Then to the point.
Oh my
In the short time after he disposed the king, soon after deprived him of his life, and in the neck of that tasked the whole state to make that worse, suffered his kinsman March, who is, if every owner were well placed, indeed his king, to be engaged in Wales, there without ransom to lie forfeited, disgraced me in my happy victories, sought to entrap me by intelligence, raided mine uncle from the council board, in rage dismissed my father from the court, broke oath on oath, committed wrong on wrong, and in conclusion, drove us to seek out this head of safety, and withal to pry into his title, the which we find too indirect for long continuance. Blunt is like, that's what you want me to tell him? No, Sir Walter will withdraw a while. Go to the king, and let there be in pawn some surety for a safe return again. And in the morning early shall my uncle bring him our purposes. And so farewell. So it's a long bit. It's a long bit. But I think that I'm excited to see the way you play this out, because I think this is one of those scenes that one of the things that Shakespeare does poorly, maybe, if I dare, is make exposition scenes interesting.
Okay.
So this is a lot of information that we get. And basically, like anyone relatively familiar, we've kind of gotten this information in bursts and spouts before this, but this is like, hey, here's everything that's happened in all of our history. Here's why I'm so mad right now, and here's why we're rebelling against the king. Now, he goes off into this whole tangent because his uncle actually got the king his kingdom.
Okay.
And now King Henry's like, yeah, but it's mine. And the Percys are like, wait, but we helped you get that? And he's like, bah! And they're like, bah! And he's like, nope. And they're like, well, okay. We'll rebel then. It's basically the history of the piece. But like, it's so long.
Yeah. Also, but I do really enjoy, and I can just imagine it being played with having him give this long speech, and kind of like you said, the other guy's like, you want me to tell him all of that? No. That was just the preamble. Now I'm going to tell you what I'm mad about. And you're like, okay.
And then even at the end of that, he's like, that's what you want me to tell him? And he's like, no, we're going to send a message tomorrow. Like, what?
This could have been an email.
This could, oh my God, that is literally all I get. So I'm going to let you go with it, and then we'll talk about, but like, yeah, I think it needs actors. This is where Shakespeare as a writer suffers.
Yes.
Because it needs to be put on stage, and it needs to be
it needs
brought
inflection. It needs yeah. Oh, drop my pen. Yeah, it just reading it to read it doesn't do the same.
It doesn't do much of anything. It's just like, oh my God, it's so many words. It's just so long.
So many words. Okay.
And that's characteristic of Hotspur anyway. But so the characters in this scene, so we've got Hotspur, who is this Henry Percy. There are a lot of Henrys in this play. Henry Percy, who is just hot-headed and he's really angry.
Okay.
He's got a lot of anger in his heart. And he's ready to march on the king right now. There's war has been brewing and everything's been bubbling and he's ready to fight. But the leaders with him, who are Worcester, Douglas, and Vernon, are varying levels of level-headed. The Douglas is the Braveheart one, who's like, you want to fight? Well, okay, I guess. Let's go. There can only be one. Is that the same thing? Is that Braveheart?
That's Highlander.
Highlander
Has, Sean Connery playing an Italian, so there are no rules.
What?
I think he's supposed to be Italian in it. It's something bonkers.
Has Sean Connery ever been anything besides Scottish?
Yeah.
Okay.
He also, I feel like, yeah, you should Google him in Highlander. I'm pretty sure that's the one where he wears a very striking red number. Yes.
Okay. All right. So yeah, they're all wondering what they're all trying to decide battle strategy. Blunt comes in. He's like, "Hey, the king says he'll let you live if you just tell him what's wrong. Like, just tell him what's on your mind, and he'll fix it." And then, of course, that's what sends Hotspur into like monologuing like a pro. So yeah, where does your brain go when you see a wall of text like that?
Usually with something like that, it's usually panic at first because that's very hard. Well, it's very counterintuitive to comics specifically, because the whole thing with comics is strip it down, make it as succinct as text as possible because you only have so much in your word bubble. So then, at least for this type of thing, I kind of rely on how I hear you deliver it and play off of that. Yeah, because just if, like I said, if I were to just read that, that'd be really hard because there's not much you can do other than have a character stand there and deliver it. So
yeah,
that's, but so when you were first talking about it, I had one idea, but then I've moved and have a separate idea that I think I'm excited about. So I'm getting that started.
Okay. And this is something that I'm going to pose the question and kind of talk about it from a theater standpoint so I can give you a chance to get your idea out on the paper before I interrupt you too much. But when I am going in, whoop, that's not what I wanted. That's what I wanted. When I'm going into building a show or deciding on what show I want to do next, and then trying to figure out what theme or whatever to put on it to make it like relevant or new or fun or different or whatever, I usually go through about, I don't know, 10 different options of things that I could do before settling on usually the first idea I had. So
Yep.
I don't know if and I know that this is like a unique thing that we do, like taking something and putting a spin on it, a modern spin on it isn't necessarily always what comics is, but like, how do you make those decisions, and do you usually stick to the first one you had?
So this is something I find that I've had a lot of practice with when it comes to like logo design, because usually if someone is describing a logo to me, I will have an immediate idea. But it's important to me that I, at least like you were saying, I at least explore a couple other options because, in my brain, part of it is like, okay, was it the first thing that I thought of because it's the cliche thing, or is it the first thing I thought of because I already have, an idea like this that I've used before? Like, I want to work through my brain to make sure that the go-to thing that I did wasn't just a copying something else or, that type of stuff. But that often means that even once I've done all the other versions, I will still come back to that very first idea that I had, because sometimes that's still the best one. But I also can, in a very sick and twisted way, I can then allow my brain to be okay that I went with my first choice because I did the research on the other parts and it says, nope, it's okay to go back to this one because you proved that it's a good idea. For this, I usually lean into the first idea that I get. A lot of that is for a time.
Yes. Yeah, of course. For something like this, it's much more.
Yeah. So, but there's definitely been times, like as we've talked about stuff, either I've then been that much more excited about the idea, or I'll be like, oh, that would have been a cool thing to do. But yeah, it's that kind of playing on the fly, which again we keep coming back to. I think it is similar to improv. With there's a reason that comedy scripts that have time and go through revisions have a lot of jokes that really pay off versus comedy scripts where the actors are just allowed to riff. Like there's two different styles of delivering that. So depending on what you're looking for.
Yeah. Did you say you had seen Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers, the new one?
I haven't yet.
Okay, it was just Tony. Because there was a lot in there that we were like, that had to be improv. You literally can't write a line that good. Like you can't. It's impossible to write something like that. It was really fun. I recommend it.
I am excited to see it. Yeah, I had a friend who it's one of those like out of my artsy friends, I have a couple of them who I really trust when it comes to art movies.
Yeah.
And so if they say go see it, then I make a point to go see it.
Yeah, I feel like stylistically, like what they did in that movie is revolutionary in the same way that Roger Rabbit was, like kind of like what we were talking about.
Yeah. Well, I love just in one of the trailers or teasers or something that I read, it's talking about how one of the characters got the 3D treatment or something like that. And I was like, just the fact that you're calling that out, and then the creepy like uncanny valley where you can't see, like I can't tell where you're looking, like just those in the trailer, I was like, oh, these are jokes just for me.
You're gonna lose your mind at one thing that they include. So you'll have to text us when you watch it.
I'm excited.
Speaking of the animation. So but yeah, there were so that was a tangent. But when you have those ideas, like those improv spur of the moment, sometimes those are the gold. And if you spend time refining them more, they just like get overbeaten and bad. But for something that you're going to put on stage or you're going to print, you kind of have to give yourself the time to look in other directions or research other themes that you could do, price it all out, budget it all out, look at something that you can effectively do with the budget that you have. And that's, I mean, I think probably more for theater. I don't know how it really works with comics, but like for me, for theater, I have to work with what I can costume.
Yeah.
And what I can costume cohesively. And that was one of my biggest problems with the show that I saw last night, is that it was like maybe there was like disco music all the way through it, but none of the costumes were like none of the costumes went together, and none of the costumes were really like disco reminiscent. So it just kind of didn't, there was no cohesion, there was no theme, there was no, and there doesn't have to be a theme with Shakespeare, but you have to choose something. You could do it Elizabethan, or you could do it in that like timeless Shakespeare.
Right.
But then you got to fit your music. And I don't know, because sometimes I feel like by saying things like that, people are be like, oh, you're such a Shakespeare purist, but I'm not. It just has to make sense. Like, I love using modern music in my shows, and we do this like timeless, almost Regency era dress types because that's a pretty simple. Regency, it feels pretty timeless. when you put it Shakespearean. But if like, yes, or As You Like It was relatively Regency, and we did a mashup of Lose Yourself and Hey Soul Sister. And but it was a cappella and sounded lovely. Like it was an original mashup that one of our actors had written. It was beautiful. You didn't really realize till like halfway through that it was Lose Yourself. And like I think stuff like that, because it tonally fits the theme. Like it's a pretty acoustic song or a pretty a cappella song, that you can do modern stuff that makes sense. I don't know. I got a lot of thoughts in my head today about Shakespeare, and not all of them are good.
So, and I'm gonna not help a ton because my thoughts are also all over the place. But when it comes to art, it's trying to find the most clear way to say it.
Clearly I shocked at that.
I was gonna say I too have all of, like, I just want to say all the things, but I can't remember if it was a specific teacher. I think it came from school, where it was just an offhanded comment that a teacher made at some point that then kind of stuck with me. And it was as stupid as it sounds, is why did you make that decision? Like, and it's okay if the decision was, I just really want to use this font because I love this font, and I built the design or I built the piece around it, which is fine. But like you were saying, if you're going for cohesion, so if I really wanted to draw a disco, I would make sure that all of my characters were designed in disco. I would try and look up, hairstyles. I wouldn't then, if I just wanted to draw disco, but it wasn't a disco piece, like maybe I would say, okay, so I'll channel like Venice Beach, like current, like rollerblading, roller skating, the weird like disco mashup that's kind of come into clothing around that scene. So then the rules aren't like, I can still do this thing that I want to do, but why? Why do I want to do it? Is it because it serves the story, or is it just an aesthetic change, like a aesthetic decision, which is fine, but it's the like, but why? Why do you want it? Like, you can justify it if it's just I think this would look cool, and here's how I can make it look cool. But if it's not that, and you can't do that, then it might be worth it to try and find a different way. Like, you didn't have to do that. So what else could you do?
Right. Yeah. I like it is a good enough reason. And yeah, that's why I did Real Housewives style Merry Wives of Windsor, because I thought it was funny.
Yeah.
And then I found all of the pieces in the text that tie into that theme. So it's like doing the work and letting yourself trust your gut. Because I think that's something that we probably downplay in ourselves quite a bit, is that we have good gut instincts.
Yeah.
And something in there is probably worth more than we're giving it credit for as a first idea. But you have to kind of let yourself come around full circle, so that you know that you've come at this from all different angles.
Yeah. And I think, anytime, luckily when you're directing, you are the final client, you're the final say so.
Yeah.
Even though now I can work quicker through the process because I trust that initial gut instinct, being able to know my process and know how to work around an idea and say, okay, so the 3 ideas that I thought were solid all got shut down. What else do I have to offer? Now, if I do have a client that is more challenging, I have the foundation to be able to do that if I'm thrown a curveball. So that's the nice, like you said, it's difficult to trust myself, because I'm like, wait, that was too easy. I must have done something wrong. It was too easy.
Yeah.
But just in case, I have a backup. But again,
have there ever?
This is this is me in my 30s as a designer, as opposed to me in my 20s, which was a very different person.
Yeah, I bet. Have you ever had a logo that you were like, oh my God, like, why won't you just listen to me? Like, I guess if this trash is what you want, then you're going to get this trash, but like, it's trash.
Yes. I've had many. And it's tough because not saying anything new or cutting edge, but it's a pick your battles. It's a, if this is going to be so much more of a headache and so much more of a fight for me, and this is just what you want and you're not budging on it, fine. Fine, I'll do it. There was one time I think I had someone who, a lot of people, when they set it up themselves, are not looking for a collaboration.
What do you mean when they set it up themselves?
So I will say the specific place that I worked, I was a facilitator. So if you had a design that you wanted to put on a t-shirt, my job in that was not as a designer. My job was I know how to get it into the computer to send it to the printer to print it onto the shirt. So I am merely a cog in this printing process.
Got
Whereas
it.
a lot of the other ones would be, hey, I'm having this event. I need you to design a logo that describes this event. So if someone comes to me with a design, I can give them reasons why it might not print well, but they're not necessarily looking for my artistic input.
Uh-huh.
So I think there was once where they had used Comic Sans and they really wanted it, and I was just really being stubborn about it. So I picked a comic book font that wasn't that and put that in instead. That was my one subtle, like, don't make me do this. Don't make me print it like this. Please don't make me do this. But yeah, and there's some, I think the ones that are really heartbreaking are, they'll bring an idea to you. I'll do all of these mock-ups, and then, they'll either share it to somebody else or come back and be like, yeah, my sister's kid said this and made this in Microsoft Word. Like, we just want it to look like this. And, looking at what they designed versus what I designed, I'm like, really? You're looking at these two things and you're okay. Nope. Hey, if that's what you want, it's your thing. But yeah, there are moments where I'm just like, really though? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's an equivalent in theater. Like for me on a design end. I don't think there is though. I mean, I don't think there's a I don't think that I can yeah. I don't know, but that's got to be so frustrating, and probably now that you're more experienced and like I think probably give fewer F's
Yes.
about a lot of things, like I at least feel like for me I would have an easier time with stuff like that now than I would have a decade ago.
Yes. Yeah. And it's I mean, one, because I don't work that job anymore, I have the complete control to say yes or no
Right.
to clients, which is wonderful. So that helps a lot, but it's a very interesting, at least to me, I find it interesting. I've had two very specific parts of my art career, one of which is very opposite to the other. So I've worked two full-time jobs for a chunk of my life that were what I refer to as point and click art. So I was an ad designer at a newspaper, and then I was the graphic designer for the garment decoration. This isn't me coming up with cool letterhead logos or cool design, to represent a business. This is me making a ton of, this thing is on sale at this company. So it needs to be clear. It needs to be readable. It's going to go in the paper. Here's a sympathy thing because someone passed away. Like, use a lot of clip art and all of that stuff. Or then moving into the sporting goods thing, you're always going to use a football of some sort, and it's going to have a name over top and football underneath and a picture in the middle. Like, these are not super creative things, but they still need to be done, and you can still make them look cool and live within brand specifications for colleges and all of this. Versus you've got something which I find so much more organic in creating comics and making prints and going to Comic-Con. Like, what a separate side to the art world that is completely open and completely creative. So that's always been a funny thing to me, where I was like, it's such a different way to make art.
Yeah, that corporate art.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Did it at least pay well?
It did, and it
sucked your soul out at the same time.
Some of the soul sucking honestly came from other aspects of the job. Like, that's the frustrating part. And because a lot of that art isn't super taxing, like I'd be super thrilled when I ever got a chance to do something way more creative and really dig into making a brand new logo.
Mhm.
But also before it started soul sucking, I was not so mentally drained that I could come home and do the art that I wanted. So it paid the bills and it kept a roof over my head and still allowed me to do what I want. When it started to then take over my life and I didn't have
Mhm.
time to do that, then I was like, oh no, now I'm unhappy.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
I can't wait for that. I can't wait to feel like I can do things and do them not because I feel like with teaching, and I'm sure that you understand this intimately, I have to do other things because if I don't do things for me and myself, then I will lose my mind. But I don't have any energy to do other things. So I'm doing all of these other things, and then these other things that I love doing become so taxing because it's using the tiniest bit of energy I have left. But if I didn't do them, I would die. So
yes. Yep. Nope. I would constantly be so mad at myself for saying yes to things and agreeing to do things and signing up for things and putting deadlines on myself. And I was like, I come home and I'm like, I don't want to do, I just want to sleep because I'm so tired. But again, if I just do my day job, I'm miserable. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it's sick and twisted.
Yes. I'm looking forward to hopefully having a day job that even if I'm not enjoying it or even if, it's not fulfilling my life or whatever I end up with, that I have the energy to do all of the fulfilling things that I have on my plate after the day is done.
Yep.
And that was really interesting that leaving teaching, um, a lot of people have reached out to thank me for having a life outside of teaching. I've had a lot of I really admire the way that you do things outside of teaching.
That's awesome.
It's heartbreaking
It
that
is. Yeah.
but I get it because unless you have communities that are as understanding and supportive as the ones that we have, where do you find things to do that are not grade papers?
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Yeah. It's, yeah. Mm. Yep.
Yep, that's kind of where I am today. I've had a lot of big change. Very quick, very big change. So, my brain's a little fried from
Yeah. And at least for me, again, it's one of those things where I say them out loud and I feel like they sound stupid, but it still took me a while to get to that realization. And it was my day job doesn't have to be any more than a paycheck.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's why even working part-time, if I work a almost full-time schedule, but still only part-time at the winery, I leave at the end of the day and there's no more for me to do. There is nothing else that I can do I mean, yes, there is, but for the for the majority of it, like I can't serve customers from my house. Like, no,
Right.
I'm done. And so when I leave there, anything else that I get to do is whatever else I want. And there's a really nice beauty in that. There's a beauty in like, yeah, it does take up 30 hours of my week, but there's a lot of other hours in my week that I now have control over. I'm still making money. I'm still having income. I'm still getting out and socializing with people and, being inspired by being
Yeah.
out in the world, not just alone in my house. But I am not tapping my creativity at every hour of my day so that I am just drained all the time. I'm
Yeah.
getting some physical activity, but it's not really mental. Not at this point. My preset speech about the wines is the same. My answering questions about the lake is the same. So it's a
Yeah, but
beautiful,
some
like,
days are more exciting than others.
some days are more exciting than others.
How are you feeling?
I'm good. I got my second shot yesterday. Although they have to switch arms, so they put it in the arm that had gotten the tetanus shot, which I'm like, oh, good, that's my right arm and the arm I need to do everything with.
Oh,
So
no.
no, it's not bad. I cleaned for like 8 hours yesterday, so my whole body is tired. But
I wish I could turn my camera to show our closet because I'm so proud of organization, but it is exhausting, isn't it?
exhausting. It is so tiring.
Like, why is it so hard to move things from one place to the next?
Yeah. No,
Why is it so taxing?
I was only cleaning essentially 2 rooms yesterday. I was like, "Why did this take me 6 hours?" But it just, it's yeah.
Yes,
Hmm.
it's wild. Um, Fun idea
Yes.
that I have that now that I'm not teaching anymore, I'm really excited to maybe push into, and I will convince you to come back to Austin for. Uh, I want to put together a like Shakespeare convention weekend.
That would be so dope.
Yeah, they did a thing in New York a couple times, but they don't do it anymore, so I feel fine stealing it from them.
Yes.
But I feel like doing a weekend of panels and workshops and different mini shows, things that
Yeah.
you could put together to like Shakespeare adjacent things, or you could have groups come in and do if they have just performed a show, like bring it there. Have things like the intersection of art and Shakespeare, have things like the graphic novels, talk about their, the no fear stuff plus graphic
Yeah.
novels plus the
Yeah.
original text, and how can those things all work together to create a more accessible Shakespeare. um how can we work on theming a show with artists or with costume designers or with lighting designers or all of those different things. It's just different like panels and everything.
That would be fantastic. And like you said, there's so many aspects to it, because just from that little bit of, Shakespeare I got to help babysit for like elementary school, like you were doing Hamlet in 10 minutes. Like that's incredible, but how do you do shows like that? How
Yeah.
do you adapt things? How do you find the resources? All of these things. Yeah. Yes.
What's the off season for grapes? When do grapes hibernate? But yeah, like I think it would be really interesting to look at all of the different elements of Shakespeare that aren't just performance, which is what I love about doing this with you so much because, you know, it all works together. And the things that you say are like inspire me to think about Shakespeare on stage differently. Um and approach scenes differently and look at the lines with like new meaning and what you've drawn out of them literally but what you've pulled out of them to put on paper. I that I never even noticed were like important lines before or things like that I just think it'd be cool to get a bunch of people together and
Yeah. No,
do
I
this kind of stuff.
it has been, especially, and I know a lot of the people you pull for Test Too Much aren't local, but I feel like it's kind of that, like there's a surprising underground community of Shakespeare people. And because I feel like you can be in the theater and in the performing arts without necessarily being Shakespeare specific, so there are cool elements you could bring to that with, hey, are you looking for places to stage things? Are you looking for lighting techs and, a lot of this backstage stuff that happens.
Right, and we could partner with or, contact places that have rehearsal spaces or just places to be that I don't know, I've got a lot of, like, ideas floating around about it, um, that I think would be really, really fun. How do you do it in education? How do you, like you said, bring it to these little littles,
Yeah.
in an approachable and not terrifying way?
Yep.
I think it'd be fun.
I think it would be amazing. Yes.
That's one of those I have space in my brain to think now and start to get ideas again, and that's always a dangerous mix. November to March or April. I was actually thinking of November. Um, I was thinking maybe because I didn't want to do it near Dragon Con. I wanted to do it on like one of those holiday weekends that isn't necessarily claimed yet.
Yeah.
By things. So maybe like Veterans Day weekend.
What's the
Usually,
date
do
on
most
that?
people have that's the 11th to the 13th this year? I don't
Of
know if it could
November?
happen for this year. Yeah.
No, I think because at least for Comic-Con season, that's past the end of our season. Like you're gonna see some in October, but there really aren't many beyond that.
Yeah. I mean, it's close to the holidays, which makes it hard. Um, it's right at the end of because a lot of theater in Austin is outdoors. So usually all of that ends in October. So people would have shows that they've got that if we wanted to like bring a whole show, like the Baronsmen is doing Hamlet in October. So if we were like, hey, come perform your Hamlet,
Yeah.
or at least they would have all their costumes and everything that like maybe even if I just do like a day, you know,
Well, and there's
like
no harm in it starts as a day
right.
and
Yeah,
then
that's what,
yeah.
lock in the weekend, start to grow it
Yeah.
to make it like a really fun and awesome thing. And then people will be like, why didn't I know about that? And I'll be like, because you don't follow me, one person on Twitter, duh.
Have you not been on this journey with me for the past 2 years? Like
Because you haven't answered my emails once in 4 years.
Also, okay, now this might be a stupid thing, but I feel like with the troupe that is already like comfortable with each other, and just from what I heard from the episode you did where you did the quick talk around at the cast party, like
Yeah.
how challenging would it be to have them have like parts of the play set and then have either an audience member or a participant like jump in on one of the roles? So you have the rest of them who are already like doing like is that a pain in the ass as an actor or is that a
Swan,
fun thing?
I'm so happy you asked that question. That's literally all my educational thing is I have 5 actors. So we have like 4 different plays that I've written it for or organized it for. Shakespeare did all the writing. But so for Romeo and Juliet, we have an actor playing Romeo, Juliet, Mercutio, the friar, and the nurse.
Okay.
So we have those 5 roles, quote unquote professional actors. So I've cut the scripts down to 45 minutes. We all know our lines. Those are the kind of most important characters with lines in the play. So the plot can happen with those 5 people only, essentially. Then I have 15 different, we've got Tybalt and Daddy Capulet and Paris and Mama Capulet and um all of Benvolio and everyone else in the play that I've really, really edited down their lines to maybe a front and a back page.
Okay.
So the kids get cue scripts. So let me pull this up because I think it makes a lot more sense looking at. But they all get a little costume piece and they get their scripts, and it's really cool that they get to be part of the show. So let's look at stop share screen. This is one of the things that I'm most proud of in everything that I've created for Shakespeare. So the professional actors, Romeo, Juliet, Mercutio, Nurse, Friar. And then these are all of the parts that audience members play. So if you're playing the prologue, you would get this. Oh, actually, I think I read the prologue as Mercutio. But if you are Abraham or Samson, you would get this script. You get a little bit of characterization. So Abraham is of the house of Montague. He's angry, easily riled up. Be ready to square off with Samson. You're gonna fight him. This is how they would get scripts in Shakespeare's time. They would just get the couple lines before theirs, or the end of the line before theirs, and then their line, the line, and then their line. So if I'm Abraham, I know that I start right after the prologue says, toil shall strive to mend. Now, in Shakespeare's time, you'd only get 3 words, but
yeah,
I figured I'd go a little easier on the kids. So I know I come in. Do you bite your thumb at us, sir? I don't know if I am playing, let's do Benvolio is a good one. If I'm playing Benvolio, I've got my character bit. I know that I enter after the nurse says this, but I don't talk for a little while. I could be on stage not talking during these 3 dots. This could be 45 minutes or it could be 2 lines.
Oh my gosh.
So what Q scripts are really, really good at doing is forcing you to listen.
Yeah.
Because again, I've got the couple lines before because they're children, but if I'm an actor in Shakespeare, I would get nothing besides but vain fantasy. I don't know if this happens in Act 1, Scene 1, or in Act 5. I don't know if Benvolio comes on stage because I don't get any of this scene, act, anything. I just get but vain fantasy.
That's
I don't know
crazy.
what's happening. I don't know who says, or I know who says it, but I don't know any context. So I really have to friggin' listen to follow the play. And then I'm standing there like, okay, when is someone going to say but vain fantasy, but vain fantasy, but vain fantasy? Those 3 words are like in my head and I hear them. Well, this wind you talk of blows us from ourselves. Supper is done and we shall come too late. Now we've got more ellipses. Okay, that might be my only line ever. Or I'm going to be done. I'm going to talk again in 2 minutes. So because these kids have studied, they've just come from studying Romeo and Juliet, they kind of have a sense of the play. And I give them a lot more context again because they're children. Yeah. But they would get all their lines. So this is a little bit, this is probably the longest part in the script or of the audience members. They've got a couple pages of lines. But yeah, that's what it looks like. And then the whole thing, if I'm following along, I know that everything in blue on my script is an audience member so that I can be ready to cover if something goes wrong. Because again, like, and usually we've got Romeo and Juliet are doing their show. They are focused on the show. They are doing all of their blocking. They're doing all of their scenes together. And then me as Mercutio and the 2 actors who are playing the nurse and Friar Lawrence are kind of like hanging with the audience kids, like the kids who are going to come up on stage so that we can nudge them when it's their turn. We've got this full, blue for audience. We've got this script next to us so we know to kind of give them a little push up. Or if someone's forgetting something, we can abate any confusion and all of that. So
that is really, really cool.
I'm happy that you asked because yes, that is something that if an actor is prepared for it, they can definitely do. And you're not going to be working with someone who's like memorized or has all of the intention, but if they are energized, like if they've got some energy, you can work with anything.
Yeah. There's so much you can do with a willing participant.
That's true.
All the difference.
Yeah, it really does. And it's really fun. And it's cool to get to see which kids have like some confidence and who's really, really nervous. And
yeah. Well, and I'm realizing now I do enjoy the kind of almost the purposeful, everything in the play goes wrong type bits where you have that, like, some people know what's going on, but maybe some people don't. And like some things are staged, but there's a humor and an energy to the fact that this isn't a fully finished, polished performance.
Yeah. And like, so we've got the 15 kids who are participating and then 150 in the audience. And they're watching their classmates either be really silly or, be really good, some of them.
Yeah.
And that adds a level of interest and engagement that we as actors can't give them because we're not their friends.
Right.
And, usually the kids that are participating are the ones that are not necessarily popular, but like we ask the teachers to give us the 15 kids, and they're the ones who volunteer, so they're probably reading out loud in class, or they're probably engaging with their classmates more.
Yep.
So it gives you the kids that their friends want to watch, and
Yep.
it's awesome. It's really really fun.
So cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that series a lot. I wish I could do more of it, but
Hopefully.
but that's definitely one of the like panels/workshops we would do, because it's only a 45-minute cut, so we'd probably talk through the way to approach it in education, and then we would just do it. We would have some actors who are off book and ready, and then get 15 volunteers, and in my mind I've got like 200 people at this convention.
Which is still, I was going to say, it gives you a chance to have great personal moments with people, but also, not be alone. And yeah.
Yep. I don't know. It's obviously far-fetched idea for now. But I think it could happen.
I also think, again, you have enough know-how and support in the staging and running of a convention from all the people that that part of it that you might not personally have ever done, like you have resources for it that you could then pull from to supplement any of the the other parts that you don't know. Like I feel like coming up with paneling and scheduling, as soon as people so that part I'm not worried about.
No, I need to get a job with like a really big rich company, so that I tell them this idea and they're like, oh yeah, we'll sponsor that. That sounds like great community engagement.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, Swan, I think it's time for you to tell me what's happening here.
Okay. It's a little bit silly, but I like it. I know. So as you were talking, my first thought, and if it had been a scene that had more interaction between the four guys who were all getting together but then kept flaking out, I was debating doing something where they were like a LARP group and they kept trying to meet together so that they could do it. Because you said like one thinks he's a wizard and all of that, like trying to schedule this thing so that they could do all of that stuff, because that was really funny to me. So you've got the one guy there and he's like in the park, very, if anyone's watched the Hawkeye TV series, like very much that, where so that was my first thought.
That's so funny.
But since we got to like one guy just airing grievances, and the other one kind of listening, I went with, or let me rephrase the specific thing where he said they keep trying to make plans but not get anything done. So we went to the golf course. So we've got a bunch of old dudes on the golf course, because where do you talk about all of these plans and discuss all of this stuff is on the golf course. And then I gave the Braveheart guy, he's gonna get the the little Scots cap, and what up, Kurt?
What's up, Kurt?
You have the other character coming in, arriving by golf cart and everything.
I come with message from the king in his little golf cart.
Yep. So honestly, then I have him going through his whole first spiel here. And so then, the messenger comes in. He's like, okay, so, here's your club. Are you ready? He's like, well, no, clearly not. That wasn't the thing. So then he's going to start. Yeah. So, so that's how I worked around the fact that he's got a whole big chunk of text. I've got him interacting with one of the other conspirators and then talking the ear off of the messenger.
So. Oh my gosh. That's so funny. Is that why you chose green for all of the outlines?
Or... It wasn't. I had just picked green because I was like, oh, I'm feeling green today. But then I was like, oh, well, now this works perfect and I'm going to stick with it. So
yeah, I didn't know if it was like super intentional. That's awesome.
Yep. So
that's so fun. And it like I feel like golf is the right sport for a long drawn out.
Yes. Yes, like the fact that he's just talking, and I was like, yeah, somehow 18 holes takes like 4 hours. And I always think of it as like, here's where the CEOs go to talk about all of this stuff that's very removed from what the actual world is doing. And
yeah, and the idea of like this battle planning or this like insurrection planning like it would happen on a golf course. Like it's a very
yes.
conspiratorial?
Yeah. Right? Conspiratorial?
Conspiratorial?
I think so.
Conspiratory based sport.
Yes.
It's the
Filled
Illuminati
with
of ball
conspiracy.
sports. That's so funny.
But it's also, isn't it sad that because, I mean, again, as we've talked about before, there's so many male characters in Shakespeare, and I have those moments where I'm like, what do men stand around and do? Like, having that moment, I'm like, what am I going to have them working on? So,
yeah. Yeah, that's really fun because I think that yeah, I'm thinking through it and like it really is a perfect place and like where do you have a bunch of bros get together that like it also is that like kind of flakiness and
yeah, but it's also, it's secluded, so it's not them doing this at a bar or
picking at each other too, like they're
yeah.
fighting with each other and for this is really interesting.
But again, you talk about costuming, it's pretty easy to find polos and khakis. So,
Yeah. Now, is there ever for like themes something that you really want to do? I know that you love cars. So
I do. I deeply love cars.
But like, so I'm likening it to I wouldn't draw this scene at a motor car rally or whatever because the focus is cars. Is there anything less specific? Like I don't like drawing 70s era clothing or like is there something that you're like, "Oh, I just really shy away from florals," or something like that?
So some of it, like with this, as you were reading, and as soon as I kind of leaned into the idea of the golf course and everything, I pulled up a couple of quick reference images of golf carts and golf courses.
Mhm.
So probably the trickiest thing is anything that is heavily reference based that I just don't know off the top of my head. Like
Okay.
I don't draw a lot of castles. So if we were to set something in a castle, like that would be really challenging for me because I just don't have it in my bank of, oh, I can pull this out on a whim and draw it.
Yeah.
Just talking along the lines of sports, like, yeah, I'm pretty familiar with most American sports, but if you were asking me, like, if we had wanted to set this on like a cricket pitch, I would be like, I don't know how to do that because I don't have the understanding of the sport enough to be able to not only set up the people but then play with the scene.
Right. And there are different things like that are it's not that you couldn't do it,
Right.
but it's that they wouldn't be as I don't know if meaningful is the right word or like um there wouldn't be extra layers of intention
Yes.
there.
Yes.
Cuz like
Intention is a great word.
if you're doing cricket, there's, a batter and a pitcher and I assume other baseball-ish uh, positions.
Yeah.
But if you don't know there should be a catcher, like I don't know if there's a catcher in that's an easy Google, but like you don't want to have to do all of those layers of work.
Exactly.
And then you put something out and the only thing everyone's going to say is why isn't there a catcher?
Right. Where is this key thing that you would know? So I think it's the equivalent to write what you know, which isn't
Yeah.
saying, you can't write beyond your personal experiences, but there's going to be a difference in depth to like now, I don't play golf. I don't enjoy golf. I love putt-putt. Putt-putt's a blast. But I have enough of the contour cultural consciousness of, how people look when they play golf and like what's televised. And some of it also is literally just from media. Like there's been enough episodes of The Sopranos where mob guys are talking on the golf course. Like, so you have that kind of in the bank of your brain, like, oh, this is a thing I understand enough to be able to adapt to my own needs.
Yep.
Which is why it's fun. Once again, coming back to why I love collaborating so much, because I'm having the person who is writing it or telling me the story have their own personal things, which are probably not going to be the same as mine. So I'm getting that personal touch through them, and then I just get to bring it to life.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really fun and really interesting. And obviously for something like this, when it's an immediate like gut reaction, draw what you want to. If you were doing a whole comic series on golf, there would be obviously more research involved and obviously
Yes.
all of that. But
boy,
for something like this,
they'd have to really pay me for that one, because that's a lot of research I don't want to do.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it was fun because along those lines of, I look back on all the different styles and stuff we've done, and I still come back to the kind of the 90s grunge we did of 12th Night. And like, you want to talk, what was just me flexing my own personal happy place? Like, that was it. Like, kind of.
This isn't your personal happy place?
Shockingly, no. Whole bunch of white dudes talking. Yeah. So, but it's, it's I think it's part of the fun of being a comic creator with, can you still have fun with something that's not your favorite all-time thing all the time? Like,
ooh, that's a great question.
Yeah. So, I don't think I'm as good at drawing fight scenes because I don't do them that often, but I love drawing characters interacting. But there are times when I'm going to need to draw, fight scenes. So,
did I ever tell you about the time in college that I was writing short stories and I wanted a fight scene at the end of a short story that I was writing, and I can't write fight scenes at all, so I just gave it to Anthony. And I was like, "Can you just write this? Can you just
Oh my god, I love it.
Can you just write this little bit? Like, I feel like I'm done with the story, but like I hate this part. I just need like a paragraph here. I just need you to kill everyone in the room except for one person, and then, make it sound cool." He didn't. That bitch.
Ugh.
But I definitely get what you're saying. Fight scenes are hard.
Fight scenes are hard. Fight scenes are very hard. And so it's a funny and interesting thing. So, my hope is that I can bring the same amount of enthusiasm and creativity to scenes that aren't easy and aren't exciting to me. And that doesn't mean that they're not good scenes or they're not exciting, but it's just like, today I showed up to draw things where I'm just like, yeah, I can draw these, but they don't light my spirit on fire with the artistic passion. Like, that's okay. Not every day has to do that, but
interesting. I feel like I don't know if I'm the opposite or if I'm just thinking that I am and I'm really the same. Because there are a lot of like scenes like this. This would be a dream for me too. This would be my favorite scene to direct because nothing happens in it because it's a stupid scene. I don't want to bash our process of choice because I think it was a really fun way.
Very technical, very highly attuned.
Scientific selection process. But like this would be a really fun challenge for me because nothing really happens in it. Because of the characterization that we get for Hotspur and the rest of the guys, I would have a lot more fun with this than maybe like an action-packed scene. And I don't know if I don't know, because I'm trying to think of maybe more in general plays that I don't love. Do I want to ever direct 12th Night again? I don't think I have anything left to give that show.
Okay.
Would I, if someone asked me to do it, would I? And do it as well as I could, of course. But I don't know if I would have fun with it.
Interesting.
I guess it would depend on the cast. Like if I'm working with fun people, it's automatically going to be a fun process.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm just trying to think through that in terms of shows. Like, me, I don't know.
Well, I'll throw out to you, I've always found it interesting when comic artists that I really admire and follow enough so that I kind of am aware of what they're working on or stuff like that. When they finally get, so if they've been employed by the big two or big three of comics and been doing, so they've been doing Spider-Man for a while, they've been doing Superman for a while, and all of a sudden they get a chance to do their passion project, it's always fun to me to see what they choose to do. Like, you get to do it, you get to tell the story you want to tell. And it's interesting to watch fan reaction to that, because a lot of people will follow them for the fact that they are the artists that they are, but then they'll be disappointed because this isn't the Superman story that I'm used to reading and not what I'm used to seeing from you. And it's interesting because, there is the expectation of them always giving this certain thing. And you're like, sometimes I don't have anything else to give in that vein, and I want to give something else. I want to, here's what I actually really creatively love doing, but also it's not as successful or it's not as financially stable, so I can't always do this thing. So
Yeah.
it's a very interesting, kind of, I don't see a similar reaction or similar things happening to other jobs or other professions. Like, I don't feel like you go to your CPA and be like, last year's tax season was just so different, and I don't like it just doesn't feel the same.
That's really funny. But teaching is very similar, because like for one of my classes I totally changed my style of teaching. I did like flexible deadlines and made it a work class rather than a teaching heavy class. And I feel like because kids talk obviously about classes, that how teachers are and what to expect. And I feel like someone coming from last year to this year, or I guess 2 years ago to this year, would have a very different experience in the class that I'm teaching, for good or bad, who
Yeah.
knows.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's really interesting, thinking about art style, because I know you see it all the time with musicians.
Yep. No, I'll never forget. I remember Linkin Park did an interview where they were talking about, they kind of moved into like their third renaissance of style, and they were like, well, you didn't like us when we were super heavy at the start, and then you didn't like us when we were doing Transformers like pop rock, and now that we're more synth, you don't like it. Like, okay,
Maybe you just don't like us.
yeah. I was like,
That's
you
fine.
keep getting mad that we keep changing, but like, yeah, it was a funny thing. Yeah, it's oh, I know it. I can't remember if it was this show we talked about it on. It might have been on An
I'm
Edition,
gonna
but
pause 1 second. My house smells like it's gonna burn down. So
well, let's not do that.
Mike's either cooking, or like he
Or
might have made a grilled cheese, and that's why it smells.
okay, yeah,
But
go
I'll be
check
right
that.
back. Okay, we're good. Mike is cooking.
Okay, good.
It's our oven is like he put chicken nuggets in the oven, and I think there might be something on the bottom of the oven that had like dripped.
Yep.
And so that's why I had.
No,
Anyway,
the house not burning down is a very important part.
yeah, big priority. But yes, we were talking on this show or In Addition. Is where you
Yes.
were.
Yes, and I'm trying to remember.
Oh,
I
no,
got
I'm so
distracted.
sorry.
No, you're fine. It speaks to where my brain is at. Shit, what was it? That's terrible. I have like a vague like tickle of it in the back of my brain, but
Yeah, maybe we'll get back there.
yeah, also not.
Lincoln Park or Limp Bizkit. One of those you were talking about.
Yes, specifically Linkin Park, but I don't want to disclude Limp Bizkit. They could have also said that.
I know Mike has talked a lot about different like bands changing their style drastically and how, you know, what that should you just rename yourself? Should you just be a different band if you're going to be a totally different sound?
I got there. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Good.
So it was a podcast that I listened to by Freakonomics, and it was specifically talking about, it was interviewing an artist who was a successful fine artist in New York City. And it's very much the same one because the fine art world is so subjective, and it's one of those where like there's no rhyme or reason to what sells. Like it's what the tastemakers say are popular and what you can get for it. Like it's such a weird, screwed up thing. Not gonna get into that, but it's the fine line that you walk of, do you continue to produce art in the style that made you popular and financially viable, or do you take a chance and reinvent your art and do something else in the hopes that it is also financially viable and successful, or knowing that it might turn off the clientele who, you know, are relatively fickle. Like that's it's kind of why I don't mind being a commercial artist, because I'm like, there's a little bit of concern for that, but it's not the same. I don't have the same entry level of worry to get into that. I'm not staking my career on the next comic that I make. So,
What did they have an answer?
I think the way that the artist that they interviewed got to the point was, one, understanding that they might sell their piece for $10,000 and then it might be resold for 60,000, and you either make peace with that because that's how the world works, or you don't do it anymore. But it was kind of the, if I can consistently take care of myself, take care, like he has a studio, so he has staff members, and he's like, if everything is okay with that, then I will pursue the art that makes me happy and kind of go from there. So it was one of those where I am cognizant of the financial needs and financial burden, but I am not solely trying to chase the approval of the people who are buying art. So,
can you define something for me?
I can try.
Yeah, I don't
know. Says the English teacher to the art major.
Well, but it is art specific. Like,
yes.
I guess what's the difference between fine art and what did you say, commercial art?
Commercial art. So for fine art, I would describe it as any sort of painting. So the new modern art movement. So the paintings that you see, the big canvases that have a whole bunch of like brushstrokes on them, and then kind of either other random streaks or splots on them. Some of them sell for a lot, some of them don't. You know, things that are a lot more, in my opinion, subjective. You don't see a lot of Renaissance era high portraiture.
Right, right.
So anything like that, sculpture, either stonework or ceramics or metalwork and stuff like that. So whatever you would kind of come into contact with it as a museum like MoMA. Yeah. Yeah. More the newer stuff. Versus someone I would say who is in advertising design or motion graphics or something like that, where, you know, you'll see this artwork up on a billboard, but you're not looking at that billboard and thinking that's a piece of art. You know, it's hanging up, but it's not the same expectation.
Interesting.
So
I feel like I know we've touched on this before, but I feel like there's a distinction in the theater world as well of classic theater versus modern theater, in kind of, or commercial theater versus experimental theater. I think there's less. I think I would be able to watch something and say, ah, yes, that is this. The same way as you look at something in a museum and you're like, oh, that's modern art. Or you look at something and you're like, that.
Yeah.
But it's hard to put into words.
So I would say, and this is not a perfect metaphor or analogy, but I would say like, when Cats took a break from its run on Broadway, you know that if you bring back Cats, if you bring back Wicked or bring back Oklahoma, you have the understanding that there is a fan base for that no matter what. So I would equate that to kind of commercial art. There is a market for this no matter what. But when you're trying out something brand new, that is an unknown property, that's kind of more the fine art, where either you'll be this incredible sensation that then tickets are sold out and nobody can get in to see it, and you're having to then put on more and more productions of it with additional cast and stuff like that, or you'll be a flop and you'll close. Like that's how I would most closely mirror it.
Yeah. I mean, that's even it's funny because even the division in the Shakespeare world, if you put on Midsummer, you know that you're going to get 50 people to audition and you're going to get hundreds of people to come see it or whatever, depending on the size of your company. But if you do Cymbeline, you might get a few Cymbeline converts, but you also might have 7 people in your audience for the total run of your show.
Yep.
And that's definitely obviously they're both Shakespeare, but in that kind of sub categorization, they're experimental and commercial.
Yeah.
Romeo and Juliet is a commercial Shakespeare show.
Yes.
And that's the Baronsmen that I work with down here. One way that they were trying to structure their seasons was they would do one like commercial hit, and then so this year we're doing Hamlet in the fall, and we did Comedy of Errors in the spring, which is very funny, but nobody knows what it is. So
Right.
you're trying to like do something that is a passion project and a little bit outside the box and something that hasn't been done a million trillion times before, but balance it with something that you can get high school groups to come see and ticket sales through the roof. And I think that's really smart to make sure that you've got your finances covered. Like you were saying, you have to be able to take care of your people.
Yep.
But then also you have to do things that are just because you want to do them.
Yes. And I honestly love that balance. Like that's a beautiful balance to me, because I don't see anything wrong with putting on a popular show to get people in, because at least for the performing arts aspect of it, or the visual arts aspect of it, it's that many more eyes on your stuff, and someone might fall in love with the way that you act, the way that you perform, the way that your troupe, I was gonna say troop or crew, and the way that your troupe works. And then so when you do something that they're not as familiar with, you've built in that we guarantee you we can put on a good show. I've proved to you that you like my art.
You trusted us with Hamlet, so now let's show you what else we can do. Yeah.
So I think that was where I think I was very divergent from a fine arts degree, because I was like, no, I don't mind making prints. I don't mind making consumable art, like stickers, and like I'm fine with that. It doesn't mean that I can't still make a one-off mural that isn't anywhere else.
Yeah.
But like anything, there are some people who, if they don't see the original cast of the Broadway show, then they don't want to see it. So again, it's all in that, how you consume art is as different as there are people. So
yeah, it's a good point. And that's I think it's really interesting to see where there's no wrong in it. Like there's nothing wrong with either sense of it. I think the only wrong is putting other people down for enjoying something that is consumable.
Yes.
Or putting people down for valuing their, I don't know, whatever. I don't have any experience in that like kind of fine art world, so I can't really relate it, but I know that it is quite commonly looked down upon to do consumable theater. So I imagine art's the same.
Did you watch Inventing Anna this is a weird tangent, but I promise there's a point.
No.
So it's interesting, and it's an interesting scandal. I say it tiptoes to the precipice of true crime. It's a financial crime. Like,
Yeah.
people didn't actually get hurt. There's some financial damage to some of the players, but it's not a murder. It's not that. But also, just side note, anytime on P2M that you say do a murder, I audibly laugh because it makes me so happy. But I'm watching the show, and a lot of it has to do because she's infiltrating the high-end art world and kind of working in that sense. And I struggled with the mini series because I feel like it's the same thing along the lines of everyone wants to have that millionaire's experience, but very few people have that. And it's that kind of, I know, I'm saying radical things. And so it's I'm trying not to get too political on all of it, but it's this like, I had friends who were like, yeah, it's this and this. And I was like, I was just frustrated about it. They're like, why? I was like, because I felt like at some point I was supposed to be rooting for her because everyone wants to be able to do this. And I was like, sure. Like, I appreciate, yeah, I would love to be able to, buy high-end art as a thing. Like, that'd be cool. But I also understand that I never will. And I'm not sad about it. Like, that's okay. I still can enjoy the things that I enjoy. So it was that, like, if you're not at this point, you're not getting the full enjoyment out of things. Like, I think that's kind of like, I was frustrated by that because no, I am okay with my consumable art. It brings me joy. I don't need it to be the one of a kind white whale.
Yeah. Well, and that's really interesting in a Shakespeare sense too, because there are only 37 plays. Nothing's new. Everything's been done. Everything's been done to death. So it should all be viewed as consumable art. It is commercial art. It's pop, it's pulp, it's not original. Yeah. Whatever you do to Shakespeare, it still is the same words that were written 450 years ago.
Yeah.
So there is no unique experience. And still, every different Shakespeare show is different.
Yeah.
So you can put a bunch in your season and crank them out, and you can do Midsummer 50 different times in 50 different ways with 50 different casts and have it be a different show every time, but it's not like new or highbrow in any sense of the...
Yep.
I don't know. All I do know is that my fiance just brought me chicken nuggets. And I'm so lucky. That's my consumable art. Chicken nuggets.
That's high art right there.
Yep.
Also, I'm positive that I am not drawing this Gulf form correctly, but you know what? I don't care.
You are absolutely not. And I love it.
I have that, like, did you notice that I just didn't want to figure out where the hands went, so they're just little weird circles? Because I'm like, nope, that's what they're going to be for right now.
I love it. And I also love that these four bozos probably have no idea how to golf. But it's something that, like, because they're rebel leaders, right? They're not necessarily, like, indoctrinated. I don't know if that's the right word, but they're not in this highbrow world. We're in this, hey, we've all come together to do a rebellion. Where should we talk about it? Oh, golf course sounds fancy.
Yep.
So welcome, Fife. We are drawing some Shakespeare. So right now we are in Act 4, Scene 3 of Henry IV, Part 1. And this scene, I will share it up again.
Yeah.
We haven't looked at it in a little bit. But basically in this scene, we've got some rebel leaders who are trying to usurp the throne. coming together. They're all a bunch of knuckleheads. They, like I said to Swan, one of them thinks he's a wizard, one of them thinks he's Braveheart. And the fact that you didn't draw a LARPing group after that.
I think, like I said, if it hadn't been the scene where he monologues, I would have 1000% done it. So maybe we bring back this one and we get the LARPing crew.
We'll do the actual like wizard scene. It's very funny. So yeah, a messenger comes in, an emissary from the king, and he's like, okay, so King Henry says if you just tell him what's wrong, he'll fix it. You don't need to start a war. Like he'll take care of it. Tell him what your grievances are. And Hotspur is like, well, you know the meme of the goose that it's like and then just
yep.
That's exactly what this scene is.
Okay, I need you to make that meme. Like, I need that to be. Oh god, it's so good.
So yeah, because, and you can see this visually. This is one of the things I do like about Shakespeare is that you can visually see on the page who has the power in these scenes, and how the flow goes. So Walter Blunt enters, he's like, tell him what's wrong. And then we have, so this is line 57. So he's got about 48 lines here. And then another 30 lines here or 20 lines here. So he's got like 75 lines that he's just like, well, and another thing. And another thing, and this is what's wrong with this, and this is what's wrong with that. My uncle helped him become the king, and now he's treating my uncle like dog shit, and doesn't even appreciate what we did for him. And then he asked me to give him hostages, and I was like, no. And then he was mad at me for saying no to him. All of this happens, and Blunt is like, shall I return this answer to the king? This is what you want me to tell him?
That's this face right here. That's the face I'm drawing right now. Yep. Are you done? And
done
another thing.
This is exactly what you want me to tell him. And Hotspur's like, no, you ding dong. I will send someone tomorrow to deliver the actual message. So it's a really fun, just like we're saying, airing of grievances scene. Yeah, Fife, we're some Shakespeare fans. The whole premise of this show is that I bring a scene to Swan, who has either not read it or not read the play, and she takes that and interprets it into something new and different and interesting. And so for this one, we've got all of these players on a golf course, talking shop, talking revolt, and I like the king, the crown on his polo. So yeah, and together we talk about art and Shakespeare and all of the things that come along with that. So,
yeah.
Thanks for stopping in. No, future skeleton. Glendower isn't actually a wizard. I mean, maybe he is. He definitely thinks he is. He's like, oh, the comets shook at my birth, and I can call. Oh, that's one of my favorite. One of my favorite Glendower lines is he's like, I can call devils from hell. And Hotspur is like, yeah, but do they answer when you call them? So good.
Oh, God. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Very much like Hotspur is so salty. He's such a piece of dirt. I love him so much. Mike and I were actually talking about Henry IV Part 1 last night. I was saying he would make a great Prince Hal because he's effortlessly cool. And then he yelled at me for calling him effortless. Which, honestly. I literally never realized we're supposed to be laughing at Glendower before now. Yes. Yes, you are. You are definitely supposed to be laughing at him and the Douglas, because the Douglas is also a a character who thinks more highly of himself. That's the tenor of these rebellion crew leaders that Hotspur has brought together, is that they all think they are hot shit, and then they don't follow through. They can't hold up to the actual fight in it. They all call out sick. They're like, my tummy hurts. I can't be a wizard today.
Okay, but also I see these
I
guys now
hat.
as all like 13-year-old boys.
It's like a Stranger Things. I can't come play war today because my mom says no.
Oh, I love it so much.
Hotspur's own uncle doesn't even show up, I think, is one of the things.
Oh my god. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's definitely not a successful, spoiler alert, not a successful rebellion. Henry IV wins because Hal does this great fight against Hotspur. They do this whole like, there's only room for one Henry in this town, and it's gonna be me. Exchange while they fight. Hal wins, finally makes his dad a little bit proud, and then becomes Henry V. So, this is a really good question. I think that, so Mike asks, so is Hotspur supposed to be a clown too, or is he supposed to be like an actual competent guy surrounded by buffoons? The way I would direct it is the second. I think there's room for everything, and I think there is humor in his explosions, in his like, because this is not the only scene where he talks for 700 lines.
Is he the Schmidt? Because I feel like he, out of everyone to explode in,
this is definitely yeah, great question, Swan. I think it's interesting because I think that we do laugh at Schmidt so often, and I think that, but it's like, because if he's not sincerely frustrated, there's no comedy in it, right? Like,
right.
If he's not sincere, so I mean, that's comedy, right? No one thinks they're a clown. They all are really like, I am sincerely a wizard.
Yeah.
I promise. Like, I'm a super wizard. And it's funny because they believe it so intently. And that is true for Hotspur. He truly believes he has been wronged. But I don't know if we're meant to be laughing at him in the same way as the others.
Okay.
Also because in his frustration and in his complaining, his grievances, and all of these things, in his outbursts, that's the best word for it, he is being everything that King Henry IV wants Hal to be. So the king has set this expectation for what he wants, what is good and right as a person, and Hotspur is it. He's just on the wrong side. And so I don't know. It's a really good question, Mike, and I'm not sure how to answer it. I think it would definitely depend on your production and your actor. If there's someone who can really lean, yeah, I don't know. I think there's something inherently funny about Hotspur because he goes on these long speeches about all of his complaints. But
also, coming back to something we've discussed a number of times, like, you have to have someone who has enough natural charisma. We talk about the bad guys. Like, some of the bad guys are ridiculously charismatic. But if you have someone who is genuinely unlikable, it can't save it. So with someone like this, like you need to have enough humanity that you feel for them when they're frustrated, but can also be like, oh, this is my friend who, everybody else is kind of here, but he's up here. Like, you need that balance to have it kind of play.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's a really fun question. I've never super thought about it very hard. But I think it could go either way. I think he could be either way, he has to play it super serious, right? So that's, I mean, for the actor's job, it just depends on what you do around him to, if you've got this close up on Blunt, like you have Swan in the comic, then he does become a clown.
Mm-hmm.
Because you see like that Blunt in this scene is the audience, is what the audience is meant to be doing.
Yes.
I love the raised eyebrow.
I love this little guy right here. He's
is that Hotspur? Is it? Yeah. Oh, they're all
him. So it's to show him moving around in so you get the stationary audience character and you get him in multiple places for his very long speech.
Oh my god, that's brilliant. Can you scroll through what you've got so far in each panel in the close-up?
Yeah. So I've got opening, of which I've spent no additional time on. Is just setting it up for the golf course. And I'm going to have a little bit of shadow here that shows you have characters coming into the scene. Okay. So then you've got the conspirators in here all hanging out, just walking onto the course, and then introducing two characters. Again, this would kind of just be them talking a little bit. So it sets the stage enough so that when the messenger shows up, you have people who can react to him. So you got him pulling up. It kind of looks like a smart car, not as much like a golf cart, but I did stop. I stopped looking at reference. Oh no.
I'll be right back.
Okay. So to keep talking to the audience, so then there's that. Maybe I will quick look up my reference real quick. And oh, so apparently they don't have headlights. My bad.
We're good.
Is Hero trying to burn the house down now?
No, Hero was sitting on the couch. I think something just tipped over in the kitchen.
Oh. So it looks like most golf carts don't have headlights, is what I've learned from.
Really? Yeah. What happens if you're golfing in the dark? How do you see where you're driving?
But also, all I know of like inclement weather and golfing is Caddyshack. So I feel like my take on on golfing is probably not the most accurate. But it's funny too, because I have a number of friends who really like to golf, and I feel like I'm going to show this to them. And they're like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "What? It's funny. This is what you do, subjective. Right?" Yeah. All I know is I want to drive the cart and drink. That's what I want to do when we go golfing.
I want to ride in the cart. I don't want to drive shit.
I want to have a
All right, so this is Blunt coming in.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. So here's him kind of announcing himself. Messenger for the king, saying hello, and kind of, I didn't want to have this panel here where he's airing all of his grievances be a whole strip. So I wanted to start it with him, with Blunt, asking the question of, hey, what did you want to say? So it opens up that, to let him go. So then also, I'm going to have him turn away from Hotspur to get like his clubs. So then in this scene, you can have so that's what you want me to tell the king, and have him be like, well, no, clearly not. So it's giving them enough movement so that they can still have action happening, but you have the space for this big speech. And I just imagine like he's going to start golfing, but then he keeps talking. So he's not actually playing through. So everybody else is just sitting there like, can you just hit it? Can you please Please just hit the ball, please, so we
Yeah,
can
there's
play.
like a natural impatience when someone's delaying a turn or whatever.
Yes.
That's really fun. What's the first we see of Hotspur?
We see him tiny over
Yep.
here, but then we see a close up of him talking to Braveheart guy.
Okay. All right, perfect. I wasn't sure if that was him at the top.
Yeah.
That's great. That's so fun. He would have like a little, is that a little mustache?
I can't decide if I want mustache or just like I just this is so terrible. It's all of the former like sports sales reps that I used to deal with all had a very specific look that I might be pulling from.
Oh, I can see it. I know exactly what you're pulling from, and it's amazing. That's really fun. I love this panel. That might be one of my favorite panels.
I enjoy. This is I'll say this type of layout is a very nope, that's not how words work. Is something very influenced by Japanese anime and manga. That's a very like having one character bounce around the scene and change in like their style to jump from their fully rendered character to like a little chibi version of them. Like that's something that I hadn't seen in Western media until I started consuming anime and stuff like that. So that was an interesting it got into my art style and it's been a way of how I express a scene like that. I like that way of storytelling.
Yeah, I feel like once you said it, especially that little guy in the back who's like, "Ah!" Uh, that very much like reminded me. Sorry, I had to sneeze.
No, you're good.
And I did not want to do it loudly into my microphone. Yeah, it very much reminded me of like any. And I've seen very little manga or anime, but I understood it immediately when you said that.
Yeah. And I think that's what's cool. And it's the once again, years later, the understanding of what my art professors were trying to say in that you shouldn't just draw one style, but also understanding why certain things are done is important.
Mhm.
And so, you have this very specific thing that is common in anime and manga, but why are they using it? Why is that the way they choose to do storytelling? And so once again, having a deeper understanding of it allows you to then, if you want to implement it into your art, you're not just copying a scene you already saw, you are using it for a purpose.
Yeah. And it's still in your style.
Mhm.
So it's not like taking something that's out of style or out of context or
Yeah.
that doesn't fit. It still is very consistent with.
So mad.
He looks like one of my exes. So grumpy.
So grumpy.
I really like that panel and I like how I could use that on stage. I think that if we're looking at this as like the next Shakespeare play, oh man, the next Shakespeare play I direct, we're going to talk about themes and styles. We're going to talk together, we're going to do some research, and then we're going to work together. And we're going to do in the whole year leading up to it, we're going to do a sketching Shakespeare for all of the scenes. I'm going to make you do all my work for me.
Yes.
And then I'm just going to have actual ways to stage the scenes now. Cuz like I would take that panel and I would plant Hotspur or I would plant Blunt in the center of the stage and I would make Hotspur like this is where we would lean into the clown question that Mike was asking. I would make Hotspur use the entire stage to like move around him and around him and around him and around him.
Yeah.
Because there's plenty of time in those speeches. And the words don't matter. Nobody cares. Nobody cares that his uncle did whatever and then King Henry wouldn't give him his hostages back or whatever. Like
Yeah.
nobody cares. It's just funny for
Yeah.
him to be like goosing it.
Yep. Well, and then you get the thing that I love when the person who is on stage who is pulling focus, even though they're not saying anything, like you get to watch Blunt give ridiculous reactions to it. And it's almost, it then even feeds into more of, you know, I'm not listening to the words that he's saying because he's just talking. But
Yeah.
in staging it that way, I feel like it's a purposeful thing. Like, no, I know you're not going to listen to all this, but here's why that's going to be funny in the payoff for this scene.
Yeah, and yeah, it's oh god, it's such a such a cool struggle for power in this scene because Hotspur has all of the vocal power, but Blunt has all of the actual power. So,
Yeah.
like, for him to plant and stand and listen, and it's one of the things that I tell actors all the time, nobody puts a camera on you when you're talking. If you're watching a movie or a TV show, the cameras are always on whoever's listening. They're
Yes.
always on the other person.
The
It
reaction.
doesn't
Yeah.
yes, it doesn't matter what you're saying. It doesn't matter what you're doing. It matters how other people are receiving it because that's all the cue to the audience. So if Blunt is standing there, like, just losing his mind and you can have this journey. This is like a dream scene for an actor because you have this whole 75 line journey that you've got to listen to and then you get that shall I deliver these news?
Like, it's just
Oh,
so it's so, and I think, and again, I come from the place of being very ignorant to this, so correct me if I'm wrong, but out of all the times when we've had a scene that has a messenger included in it, this one feels like he has so much more agency than many of the other ones, and that's really cool. Like, that's a fun, I feel like so many of the other messengers are very worried about their mortality when they're bringing messages, whereas this one's just like, let's go. What have you got? What have you got for me? Like,
well, and it's because he is a lord of the court or whatever. He's not a traditional messenger who doesn't have a name. But what I would challenge anyone to do is if you have a messenger role, like, don't stop there. Every person has a name and a job. Like, obviously, their job is messenger. What is their position of power in the court? Um, for by Patreon, the last month and this next couple months, is I'm doing just general if you're auditioning for Hamlet monologues to use. And I
mhm.
sorted all of the characters and I went through and I looked at every single messenger and every single like soldier, like just the name soldier, um, to look at which ones are more internal versus more external, more whatever versus whatever. And like there's so much characterization that happens in all of the messengers. Some of them are very much worried for their mortality. But some of them are just like, F it. This place is going to the poop town and I'm on the front lines of it. Like, there's, you have so much power as a messenger. Like, if you have the news or if you're receiving the news, like, you still have as much power to take in the scene as someone like Blunt does. We just don't ever give them the time
Yeah.
because they don't have a name. Just tragic.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah, I feel like this is a. No, here's the connection. I did this on purpose, but that's good. I feel like the character of Zazu in The Lion King could have been a very minor role. Like,
Hmm.
he's a babysitter, he's a messenger, but because there is so much personality to that, and even when he's trapped by Scar and locked up, he's still sassing him. Like, yeah, that's
Yep. There's more power in characters than, or there's only as much power in characters as you're willing to work with. Like, if you're going to take a messenger role as a director or as an actor, either way, it is on both of them, and throw it away as unimportant, then it's going to be unimportant.
yeah.
But if you're going to put pressure on it and put like work into it, those moments can steal shows,
Yeah.
and
Oh.
they should. That's your, if you have a role that you're not happy with, your goal should be to steal the freaking show. Actually, I had a friend that said that recently because they had been cast in a role that they should have been cast in a better role, objectively. And they said, yeah, whenever I get cast in anything, my goal is just to make the whole show about me anyway. So, and honestly, they did. If you walked away from that show, nobody in their right mind should say, "Oh, this minor role was my favorite part of the show." But
yeah,
so many people were like, "Yeah, but what about this role though?" Which, if you're a good actor, you can do and should do.
And especially with someone who, I feel like it's the evolution of moving out of the high school where the goal is, this show is about me and it's not a cooperative thing. It's I'm going to steal the show at the expense of my co-hosts. Whereas, now as an adult, you can look at it, or at least a little bit more of a fully formed brain person.
Yeah.
As a, no, I'm not going to do anything to hurt the show, but I'm going to bring my A game. And, when I'm on stage, you're going to remember me.
Yes. Yep. It's not an overacting thing. It's not a stealing focus or pulling focus. It's when you have lines, you're going to make them fucking count.
Yeah. Nope.
And that's something that I really, the balance of doing, it's dangerous because there are people who are incapable of not pulling focus if they're trying to like overdo it, or if they're trying to like make scenes about them. It can go very bad very, very fast.
Yeah.
But I think it just proves what a good actor this person is, that they were able to steal the entire show. And yeah, Mike's gonna chew the scenery all day long. Sounds like a good place to wrap it up, Swan.
I think that's a perfect place. This was super fun.
Yeah, I'm sorry that I forgot it was Sunday.
No. We made it work. We got a whole thing out of it.
But I liked this kind of roll the dice, because I think that I've never in my life would have picked this scene ever.
Right.
Ever. It's like a nothing scene in a play with really something scenes. But I feel like we found so much more in it than I ever would have.
Yeah, no, this would have been one as a reader I would have been incredibly intimidated by, because I would have gotten halfway through his speech and been like, what is happening?
What is happening?
Why is he still going?
None of this matters.
No, this was awesome. Thank you.
This was really great. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.